everybody, and welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We have a very, very important topic to get through today, and I'm super excited. And I'm very excited to have the three of these thought leaders join me today. We have a fantastic panel that know this topic inside and out, and they're going to share so many insights with you that you can take away and put into your day-to-day right now. Okay, so we do have a lot to get through today. But I'm super excited. I'm excited to learn, to be completely transparent. I haven't had the most experience in forecasting, so I can definitely heighten my skills, and that's why I'm excited for this conversation as well. So what we're speaking to today, we're going to talk about essential forecasting tactics that will cut time spent by almost 50%. Okay. So, we spend so much time forecasting, and so many orgs don't have a set in stone process for forecasting, where they're still relying on intuition, guesswork, and so on, which just isn't going to provide the results that you need and want moving forward into 2022 and so on. And I've had experience in the past where I did the same thing and it really didn't work for me. So I'm really excited to hear from these guys and what they've done to help their team succeed and forecast into the year. I want to now introduce our incredible panel. So today we have Jordan, Chris, and Pradeep. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to join us. Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar.
Thanks, excited to be here.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Okay, guys. Well, I'm super excited to hear what each of you have to say. Thank you so much for taking the hour, 45 minutes to an hour out of your day to join us. But before we dive into it a bit further, I do like to get a bit more insights on each one of you, so our audience can get a bit more acquainted with who is joining us today. So, Jordan, I'm going to start with you. Do you mind just giving us a bit of background on yourself, who you are, what you're all about, how you came to be where you are, so our audience can get a bit more acquainted?
Yeah, so I am based here in Denver, Colorado. I saw a couple Colorado folks in the chat, so welcome. I am a director of sales for the commercial segment here at Conga. It's a solution that revolves kind of around streamlining the go-to-market process, really for sales reps, documents, contracts, signatures, and forecasting, all along that process. I've been in sales since out of college, went to CU Boulder, and have been in SaaS ever since, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Well, I know you probably have tons of insights on what we're speaking to today, so thank you for giving us your time and joining us today. Really excited. I'll throw it over to Pradeep. Pradeep, thank you so much for joining us today. Pradeep's joining us from India. It's super late for him, so thank you so much for hopping us on today and giving us your time and insights. Please just give us a bit of background on yourself, who you are, and how you came to be where you're at today.
Sure. So I'm a salesperson by heart, nature, and profession. Started out as an SDR, like dials like 200, 300 dials a day, and all the way up to the VP of sales, right? So I think way back 7-8 years before complete my engineering, happened to land into sales by accident, right? And then have been enjoying the journey since then. Did a ton of mistakes, like plenty of mistakes, right? And little learning, and some little success as well, right? So I think that's been my journey so far.
Fantastic. Love it. Well, thank you for joining us. And I'm excited to hear you probably have insights from the very beginning of the sales process all the way to the end and everything that goes in between. So thanks for taking the time to hop on. Last but not least, Chris, thank you so much for hopping on with us here today. Just give us a bit of background on yourself, who you are, so we can get a bit more acquainted.
Absolutely. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for having me. So my name's Chris. I work at Conga. I've been there the last 2.5 years or so is where I started my SaaS career. Came from a little bit of a different background. So didn't go to college, but I worked doing a lot of electrical work and pipe fitting, and found out that I wanted to get into sales. So I started out as an SDR 2.5 years ago, and I actually worked in a startup where we pretty much did everything from notebooks and everything. Didn't have a CRM. So really came to Conga and started learning a lot about different sales tools, sales tactics, and things like that. So excited to be here. And I'm an account executive here at Conga.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Well, honestly, it sounds similar to my path. I was a pipe fitter in my past career as well. And then I ultimately decided that I wanted to get into sales too. I did go to school though, and then ended up to where I'm at now. So love to hear that. And thanks again for taking the time to join us. Okay.
Absolutely.
So we know who's with us today. I'm really excited to dive into it. Let's do just that. Okay, we've got a great conversation today. So I want to start off the conversation with some stories from each of you guys. Okay, so forecasting, I know it can be very challenging to build out a process that is one, reliable, and two, something that can be repeatable across multiple different teams, right? So I would like to hear a story from each of you about forecasting processes that you've used in the past that didn't work, and why didn't it work? Pradeep, I will start with you on that one.
100%. Tried a lot. Really, none of them worked. So so starting from I would call the best thing where I spent a lot of dollars to actually learn from. I went to a consultant, right? So since my deviance in forecast was like greater than 7% at one point of time, right? And I'm talking about the target of 10 to 12 million dollars. And deviance of 7% is literally very bad, right? And that's when I went to a consultant and I learned this great tactic, right? How can I forecast using Medpic? And I tried implementing it. It burst within 3 weeks. Right? And not only did it burst, it damaged even more. And then the 7% deviance went all the way up to 15%. Right? I went that bad. So the problem fundamentally with many of the forecasting methods out there and tactics out there is they try to overcomplicate stuff. Right? Whenever it comes to forecasting or arithmetic in sales, generally people try to bring in tons of too much complicated models, systems in place, and all they end up doing at the end of the day is take the real salesperson out of you, right? And that I think is the fundamental problem with many of these tactics, right? And every single time I try to implement a tactic, I'll also get an addition of system in place as well. Anybody would try to sell me a system, right? And I think in the G2 grid, there are more than 500 sales systems out there, right? And probably if you just pick any of them and ask them, will you solve the forecasting problem? Every one of them will say, yes, I do it, right? And that's the plight of it. So how many systems can a person really use, right? So that has really been the problem for me, especially, right, with forecasting, because generally the methods that I've tried, starting from the basic sense of best cases, commits, and all of that, all the way up to complicating it with tactics like Medpic, right? It just bloats it up, right, and dumps it down. And that's the real problem that I've experienced with forecasting.
Totally. No, I love that. Good. Great. Well, I want to hear some other stories about it, and we'll touch on the opposite side of it too, of what has worked as well. So, Jordan, I'm going to throw it over to you. What kind of any processes that you've used in the past that didn't work? Because I'm sure there's quite a few people in the audience that can relate. So let's hear what you have there.
Well, I distinctly remember walking into my first QBR as a rep, and I said, no, I have a really good gut feeling about this. And I'll tell you, the gut feeling is not always, correct. It's definitely not the best way to forecast based on some of that ambiguity, that intuition, trusting your gut. I'm feeling good about this deal. And I think, that's ultimately for me when I was a sales rep and now as a leader, I think forecasting is often a great time to think back of forecasting really starts at discovery, right? And it's an opportunity for you to really improve as a rep, but also as a leader of hey, where can I coach and where can I mentor an individual? Because ultimately, right, we're digging in, we're asking the questions, we're making sure that we're tight on those buying processes and those closing plans, but if we're asking the right questions on that initial discovery call, if we're digging in, if we're asking the why and we're really understanding, it makes it very easy to fill out a forecasting component like Medic or, whatever tools out there. So I think that methodology, once it kind of sunk in, I'm like, it's, yes, often we say, like, I think sales is an art and a science, but, once you start thinking back into that data, thinking of some of that sales velocity and then understanding, okay, what does my business look like? But also, what am I doing in each deal? What did I miss? And then that's less about what's going to come in necessarily this month, but how am I going to improve this for my next opportunities?
Mm-hmm. No, I love that point on where it all starts in discovery, because if you do a good discovery, then you can kind of actually really understand. It's like, okay, how is this going to progress over the next little bit, and what's it going to look like? So that's a great point. I love that. Awesome, Chris. Love to hear your forecasting process that didn't work. Let's hear what you got there.
Of course. So before I came to Congo, I worked at a startup, and we were pretty much working out of notebooks, right? So we were playing all the guesswork, and we were sticking with the gut feeling. So we'd meet on Wednesday morning and kind of walk through our deals, and it was all just guesswork without a real process. So the guesswork and the gut feelings never were accurate. There was always holes. There was always things that fell through. But I would second what Heisel and Pradeep both said. So it really requires having a process up front, so that way you're filling in the gaps later on when you're forecasting. You're not focusing so much on the forecast itself. So it all starts with discovery. So I used to get really bogged down by forecasting when I first came to Conga, thinking it was spending way too much time, thinking, hey, we're filling out way too many fields, this and that. But really, when it came down to it, and we kind of ironed out our processes, you're filling out things that you really need to have in a deal so you can know where your holes are. And that, like Heisel said, that all starts from the very beginning in the discovery phase. So that way you're just kind of working backwards and filling it in from the start, as opposed to, having a system that's taken too much time.
Totally. And then once you do that at the very beginning, then that's done. And then you can ultimately just refer back and then focus more on the actual selling process moving forward, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Fantastic. Love that. Okay, cool. I think, we'll go back, because we're trying to figure out how we can eliminate a lot of the forecasting aspect. We'll go to we'll push the processes that did work towards the end. Plus, we'll probably go through your processes through the conversation, so that'll all come to fruition. So thank you guys for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. And Chris, I know I mentioned in our little pre-call that when I first started out, I didn't have any leadership or any kind of thing. So I was fully on the guesswork, intuition aspect of doing it. And, the person that I was under would be like, so how do you feel that this is moving? Where do you think this is in the stage? And I'd be like, I think it's definitely going to close, but I had no clue, so, or at least no indicators that could really help with me. So, great. Love it. Okay. Now let's move on. Okay, so one thing I like, going off of, I heard from all of you guys say that we're trying to eliminate the amount of time that goes into it. But then again, there are many organizations that do take a ton of time, like I just mentioned, speaking about closing a deal and what needs to be done to rather than focusing on metrics, forecasts, to help move that deal closer to close, right? I'll get each of you to give me a bit of a rundown, but can you run me through some tactics / steps that you use in order to kind of cut down the amount of time that you actually put into the forecasting process? Chris, I'll throw it back to you.
Of course. So I think what it really comes down to, we pretty much use a medic system here at Conga, and it's corny. It's actually called Now Conga. But it's certain fields that are required to fill out in an opportunity. For me, the most important piece was filling all that out while I'm on discovery. So that way I'm not putting it in somewhere else. I'm not keeping information in my head, and everything is immediately going into Salesforce. So that way I've got my source of truth, and I know where each deal stands from the start, and what things that I may or may not have missed in discovery, or potentially where the gaps are. So I would say what really cuts down on forecasting for me is making sure that um, it actually, you'd probably relate to this. It's when I used to do a lot of pipe fitting, it would be never pick something up twice.
Yeah.
And kind of treating that the same with the information that's going in the CRM, right? So it's not putting it in somewhere else, keeping it in email and emailing back and forth. It's putting it all, finding a way to put that in Salesforce as quickly as you can, or whatever your CRM might be. So that way everything is housed and it's there and it's done. So starting there, so you're not working backwards and then going in and saying, okay, I think I know where this deal is. It's, you know exactly where it is from the start.
Got it. Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that. I remember I'd get yelled at all the time when I'd have to run back and get something to bring back, and they'd be like, "Come on, you should have had that from the get-go." So yeah, I totally, I get it. Just to add on, what kind of pieces in the forecasting process do you think that are some of the more wasteful pieces of forecasting, in your opinion?
I personally think we forecast way too much and way too often. Of course, as many sales reps would, we would like to spend more time closer to the money, doing things that are actually going to help opportunities close. But I would say what any business would need to look at is what are they requiring to go into their forecast, and are they monotonous steps? Are they monotonous things to fill out, and do we really need them? Because one, you're looking at sales reps that could be spending way too much time on items that are monotonous. Or two, if they are monotonous, then odds are, not saying I would or not saying I do, but sales reps can typically take shortcuts. So then you're going to be left with, potentially inaccurate data or false data, because they're going to be doing things to get them filled out or done as opposed to having them accurate.
Got it. Awesome. No, I totally get that as well. Great. Pradeep, I would love to hear your thoughts on, tactic steps that you've used at your organization to help, cut the forecasting process down, per se.
Sure. So after the ton of mistakes, just a continuation of the previous rant, right? The final statement was boiling down to two variables, just two variables. Like a lot of us know it in more complicated terms, but I'll start with the real sales side of it, right? So one is the urgency, the first ticker, right? So how fast or how frequent you're increasing the urgency on any given deal, right? And that starts right from the discovery process, right? Like how Jordan said and Chris said, right? And yeah, in fact, like we can also believe that you begin to lose the deal right when you start the discussion, and it should be that early. And are you ticking off the urgency? Are you increasing the urgency at every single point of the time, right? And that is what we call as the expected close dates within the CRM, right? Are the close dates moving and all that, right? And the second important variable to the forecast, right, and the most important variable is advance. Are you advancing the deal, right? Many times, right, what information like the CRM or any other different tool that gives us is the like deal stuck in a stage, and so the forecast is bad, or let's say the deal stage is not moving and the forecast is bad. But let's say, for example, if I'm a rep and I'm moving deal stages quite often, will I win the deal? 100% not, right? Am I advancing the deal? That is the important thing that we should look at forecasting, right? I was like looking at this. This is something that I picked up from Jamie Buss, right? I was looking at her interview, and generally, like I think this came out 3 to 4 years back, where she was forecasting 100 million revenue at Zendesk with a 1% accuracy. Right? That's phenomenal. And more likely, she broke it down into very simple pieces, right? As advance and continuation, right? If I'm continuing the deal, then it's just stuck in a particular stage, right? Which means that I'm not moving it forward versus I'm just rotating in a single stage. That's more often than not why you lose deals, right? And if you advance deals, then yeah, possibly you're going to win it, right? And these are the two variables based on which I started training my reps, right? At Wingman, in Ally, right? Previously, and I saw great success with that because when it's dumped down to this extent, people start thinking critically, right? Because like now when I talk about urgency, people are now going to think how I can add a great amount of value in a short period of time, right? So that
Mhm.
I can align with the urgency of the buyer, not your urgency as a seller, but with the urgency of the buyer. That's variable number one. And two is how can I add value and move the deal at every single call I'm taking on with the customer, so that I leave with an action item and I also participate the customer in the action item as well. So both are committed now on the deal and not just one is committed. And now you maximize this by n times. That is your forecast, right? And that's
Mhm.
what has worked for me right, in the past. And moving on to your second question on what are the other pieces that's generally not needed in forecasting. So possibly like why it takes a ton of time to even forecast is because you're letting your reps toggle through multiple different spaces, right? They need to enter the CRM, and they need to fill a sheet, they need to change the stage, and all of these manual work, right? And as I said, right, even when I was a rep, I never enjoyed doing this, right? I wanted to be closer to the money because that's why I'm getting paid as well, right? And that's what excites me as a salesperson. So as leaders, we got to critically think, right? How can we reduce these systems, right, in place, right, and make the systems that we have even more effective? That I don't need to like continue doing the manual work. I don't feel like an admin. I feel like a real salesperson there, right? And that's when your reps enjoy the process, and you enjoy the process as well. Like you don't like spend these hours and hours of forecasting meetings asking questions like, "Hey, why didn't you update your close date?" Versus you'll be spending productively. Have you multi-threaded? Right? That's a good question to ask during the forecasting meetings, right? And that's why like having intelligent systems in place is much more important, right? Critical importance than having just recording our manual tools in place where you're just recording information and not really taking any action out of information.
Mhm. Awesome. No, that's great. Great insights. Have you? I'm sure all of you could have an opinion on this, but have you ever seen it where reps might be advancing deals almost too fast, where they think that it should be at this stage when it's really potentially not, and that can kind of skew your whole forecasting plans?
I
Totally.
think, when,
Yeah, Jordan.
yeah, I was to say, of course, right? I feel like there's a two prong, right, that happens. Either, you'll have some individuals that, they tend to sandbag, right? They're overly critical. They don't want to do it until it's like almost locked down and they don't want to put it in their forecast. And to those individuals, right, it's engaging them to say, let's take a look at your business. And, if you're in more of a faster sales velocity, like what are you going to be able to create and close in a quarter? What have you done historically? And then using those data, but also, we know that you're going to advance on X, Y, Z. But then on the other turn, right, you have that exact component where, maybe people are really overconfident, they're excited because there is a high potential, for money at the end of this. Hey, this is a big deal. And I'm feeling overconfident, right? It's always the largest deals that we're feeling the most confident on. And those are the ones where I think, it kind of goes back to what Pradeep was mentioning too, is, as a leader in those forecasting calls, you want to make sure like you're not going down and saying, hey, is this close date updated? Is this next step updated? If that stuff can already be taken care of, your forecasting is going to be focusing on what's meaningful and happening in the opportunity, right? What are we strategically needing to do to advance the opportunity? Or, hey, we're saying that this is in most likely, but it really, does this need to be moved down to best case? Or, where are we realistically in this opportunity? And it's having those discussions to understand really what are the details of the opportunity to help move it advance. Or, hey, I think we're getting a little overconfident because we don't have X, Y, and Z laid out. We need to push it back.
Yeah. No, love that. That's great. Jordan, do you have any? You may have just answered it to your extent there, but are there any kind of other specific tactics that you use to cut kind of the forecasting process in half, or at least help your team do that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is in enabling them and understanding, hey, what do you need in an opportunity? And really, I think for leaders, it's a time for using those forecasting calls and potentially having them in a smaller group setting, where 2 or 3 reps versus individuals, so they can learn, hey, what what is a misstep that we had in this opportunity? Where can we continue to go in and lean in from an enablement standpoint on some of that deal execution so they can see where do I need to be tighter? But it's really coming in prepared, right? Having the expectations set with the reps saying, hey, what do you need to know, right? Whether it's, a medic methodology filled out or the now Conga, like where are the gaps and the opportunities? And also eliminating the fear of like, hey, if you miss your forecast, this is going to cause XYZ, but also being honest, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do in sales is, whenever you really want to win something, you're can tend to be blindly optimistic, right? And especially if you're really hung up on an exciting opportunity, we want to win it, but we have to be the most critical and we have to be the ones that are the most humble, because if you're going to win those opportunities, you have to be realistic with yourself and say, hey, I still need A, B, C, and Z, right, to get to that opportunity. And when we take that look back, I think that kind of enablement and the methodology helps. And it kind of resonates with reps of like, hey, we can only help you get closer to your forecast. And also going into pipeline. I think, forecasting can often be of like what deals are in play. But we all know that the sales, we can tend to be a bit of a roller coaster ride if we're not able to continue forward, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's having the conversation, what can we pull forward, but also where can we focus on pipeline to ensure that you're continuing that momentum, whether that's on a quarterly basis, monthly basis, based on your transactions. As a sales organization, I think is the other component that relates less to forecasting, but it can also help be a part of the conversation.
Got it. Awesome. Jordan, Chris, going on being an account executive, I'm sure you're moving deals through the different stages constantly. I know Jordan said there's some people that are very overcritical and they want to make sure that everything's moving forward. What's your approach on that? How do you kind of look at when's the right time to move someone from X stage to X stage?
I think luckily for me, we have a process that really makes sense here at Conga. So, I mean, Heisel said the term sandbagger, so I've been called that once or twice too. Holding opportunities and waiting to create them until they're much, much further along. That way it's less work. But I think for me, it's really just kind of really having an understanding of where things are moving with the customer, right? So like we have 6 different stages that we move through. So I mean, for me, it's we also get alerts too, so which really helps. So if we have something that's stuck in a stage for too long, then I know that, hey, actually this has fallen apart over the last fallen to the side over the last couple of weeks, and I need to follow up, and I need to get some time on the calendar, and I need to make sure that this stays moving, and we get the right decision makers involved, we get the right people doing the right things, right? So for me, I think it kind of just all goes back to the same thing what I said in the beginning. It was just updating things as they happen in real time. Because I think what happens so much with sales reps is you can have 10 different conversations, but if you don't update your CRM and you don't want to, then those 10 conversations are meaningless in the CRM and what your sales managers could see, or potentially other people that are looking into your pipeline. So if you're just updating things in real time, it just becomes easier and easier over time. But luckily, we have a system in place that makes it easy for me, so there's not a whole lot of friction.
Totally. Good. Well, that's good. As long as you got the good process, then you're set, right? So thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. I'm going to throw it back over to Jordan, and I'm going to move on to our next kind of topic that we want to speak to, right? So data is everything when it comes to, forecasting sales and kind of projections and so on, right? So when you're building out your forecast for each, quarter, each year, what does your, playbook process look like to quickly gather the right data, the most valuable data to kind of into one place so it can really inform your forecast to, help you hit your goals within certain percentages and so on? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I would say, the first look, right, high level view, you're going to look at, what is currently in pipeline. And I think, what is in pipeline by a particular stage, right? How many do we have in negotiation? And then, understanding your businesses, what is a typical close rate by some of those pipeline stages? What can we estimate to close, based on the time that it takes for an average deal to close in a particular, business segment. And then I think it depends a little bit on an organization of like, what is that sales velocity? And I think this is something that, currently working in the commercial segment, we have some opportunities that can be much faster velocity. So they can be, 1 month sales cycle, 2 months, 3 months. So things can happen or create and close, within the quarter. And I think that's also something that, getting the mindset of, in front of some of those reps of like, hey, what can you actually, what is that run rate? What does that create and close? So I think that some of those data metrics and having holistically that understanding gives you a great start to going into, an upcoming quarter, an upcoming forecast of like, what is going to happen, what's happening currently in the business. And then from there, it's understanding, okay, what deals really are going to be the key components of here, and then understanding the details from there. But I think that some of those key metrics, just to start on a high level, are definitely helpful.
Cool. Is there any kind of go-to, pieces that you go to when forecasting? Like some, I've heard that like, a lot of people forecast based off of, 12% in ARR each year, right? Growing in revenue. Is there anything that kind of you start off with that it's like, this is my go-to piece of data, and then I'll kind of fill in the gaps as we go?
I would say I always start with, hey, I think the biggest thing is like, what is the close ratio by a pipeline stage? And I think for every organization, it might be different, right? And you also know, where do most deals get hung up? Is it, getting them, if you're a trial organization, is getting the trial? Is it, post demo? Or, what is the close ratio by this particular pipeline stage? I think is really the most meaningful to start. And then, being able to understand like, what is a create and close? Like if, you're looking somewhere in an enterprise organization where it's going to be much more of a year basis versus transactional. If we have faster sales velocity, what are we going to be able to create and close? What have we done historically? I think that's something that's helpful. Like, hey, if we know that 30% of what we're going to close every month is made in month, that's really a helpful number to say, okay, how is this going to be? And it's a repeatable number to add in. So I think those two are probably the most beneficial without looking into the deals.
Awesome. Love that. That's great. Cool. Pradeep, I'll throw it over to you. What kind of, what kind of pieces of data and, help you build out your process? And what are the most valuable pieces of data that kind of help inform your forecast when you are, creating those for quarterly, yearly, whatever that looks like?
Sure. So the first important metric that I look at is sales efficiency, right? Personally, which is like on an average, how efficient we are to the quota, right? And that's a very important metric, right? Because once you broaden that out, like it's not a narrowed down like metric, but from a high level, it just shows the efficiency of the sales team, right? And also helps you thoroughly plan your capacity for the rest of the year. And then you look at the win rate, right? And win rate, I like it to break down by segments and region, right? If possible. If you're dealing with multi-geo, right? Then having it broken down by different geos will help, right? Like North America and Europe generally are the two major geos for many of the SaaS companies out there, right? And having it broken down will give you clear insights as to is there any kind of like geographic win rate differentiation, right? And second by segment as well, right? If you have an SMB, mid-market, and enterprise, if you have a multi-segment play, it will really help. Or if you're a single segment play, then it's pretty straightforward, right? And when measuring the win rate, right? And this I particularly learned from Insight Square. That is one tool that I loved using. And I still love using Insight Square, right? Because that really gives the essence of what you want, right? And assembles the information in the right manner. So what I learned from there is it's not so much important to actually measure what you're predicting versus what you're closing. It's more important to measure the number of opportunities you're predicting and the percentage you're closing from the number of opportunities you initially predicted. And when you're measuring this as a win rate, right, that is the real accurate win rate. So that actually projects how efficient you are in predicting your win, right? And that is a real powerful forecast mover, right? Because easily, if I'm predicting 100K at the start of the month or a quarter, and I'm closing 100K, then it doesn't mean I'm 100% efficient in my forecasting. I could have brought that 100K from any of the other in-period pipeline that I've generated, right? or it could have been just one deal where I got lucky with. But to build a predictable model, the number predicted versus the number closed is a very important critical metric, in my opinion, right? And this is the data side of it. And then what I do is I also get closer to the information side of it, right? So I've been a customer of both Gong, and now I'm selling their competition Wingman. So through these tools, I get closer to the reality, right? Where what I do is like, okay, what are these tools now telling me, right? Is my model correct, right? Are customers depicting this model for me or not, right? And that is an important information to validate as well, because it's easy to build tons of models on a sheet, but if your customers are reacting differently to it, then ultimately your model is broken, right? So it's good to analyze the customer models through tools like these, where you're much closer to the reality, much closer to the customer, right? And you can build the broader 30,000-foot view and basically formulate your plan, right? And that generally leads to a lesser deviance than others.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that comparison. That's great. Cool. Chris, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on kind of the key data points that you use when you're building out your forecasting and so on?
I think a lot of it comes down to just really having an understanding of your run rate. So understanding what opportunities close and where they're coming from. So if it's generated by an SDR, if it's me outbound prospecting, if it's an inbound, if it's coming from a partner, et cetera, and understanding where all those opportunities are coming from and where they should come from. And then for me, since I'm more of kind of, I guess, the end product of what sales operations and sales leaders are putting together, for me, it's making sure that I'm filling up those buckets, right? So I'm strategizing with my SDR, I'm reaching out to partners and customers, and I'm doing my prospecting to make sure that I can build the right pipeline so that I can follow that number, like Pradeep said. So you can make sure that you have the right opportunities, and that percentage should close from those opportunities.
Got it. Awesome. I want to hear also from all of you guys, because you guys you have your data points that are very key to how you guys forecast. What have you seen? Maybe people that you've worked with in the past, or even your teams that are pieces of information that they're using that you found not to be useful in the forecasting process. Jordan, what do you think?
I think it's a little bit of what Pradeep said, right? It's understanding the number of opportunities, right? I think if you just look at a forecast, maybe someone is, an individual or a leader is forecasting 100K, and that's great, but is it made up of 2 opportunities, or is it made up of, 10 opportunities? Because I think that the opportunity size, there's always going to be those whales or those bigger opportunities that great, that's awesome, right? But is that really sustainable in terms of like how to hit quarter over quarter, month over month, year over year? So I think looking into and understanding the number of opportunities instead of just looking blatantly at like, hey, that's what hit, and understanding, what makes that up. And I think also in terms of once things actually go closed won, or even in pipeline, I think it goes back to what Chris said as well. It's like, hey, what channel is that actually coming from? Because I think understanding how that's going, how that's trending quarter over quarter can, allow you as a leader to say, okay, what channels we need to invest in more? Where do we need to lean in more into, right? What's struggling or what's being challenged right now? And also what can we do to, if we need additional pipeline, what can we lean into right away? That can be a quick lift. And then lean into some of those things of like, what's the ACV by some of those different channels? Because one again might have a certain average ACV that's much higher, or XYZ, so you can start to see what pipeline channels are really helping you from the beginning that will drive you through, in addition to some of that.
Got it. Great. Cool. Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. Because I know a lot of people probably run around with multiple different numbers, multiple different data, and they think it might be the right stuff to focus on when really it might be wasting time, right? So love those insights there. Okay, moving on to our next topic here. So when forecasting, there are many teams involved within an organization, or there could be many teams involved. Pradeep, I'll start with you. how are you working with the different teams within your organization to make sure you are forecasting off of the most accurate information in order to hit your specific organization goals? Do you have any insights around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right. I'll break it down into two parts. One is like there is like multi-team within the customer's organization and also within your organization as well. And generally, like during forecasting, we tend to miss both of that, right? And this particularly because we look at only the prospect or more really the champion alone who's going to move the deal for us forward, right? But if the teams internally and if the teams externally are not aligned to the goal that you have with the champion, it's almost always very difficult for you to move the needle on the deal, right? So let's start a little bit with the internal teams that you have. Like there's product team that will generally get involved from your side, and there'll be like customer success team, right, for the implementation of the broader customer success metrics and sometimes even marketing team to pass the loop and pass the feedback forward as to hey this is how realistic we want the quality of the leads to be, and this is the data to support that, right? But let's start a little bit with the product and the customer success teams, right? So generally we tend to leave these variables out, right, of the picture, but more often than not, the internal coordination and the movement that you have within your internal teams is very important variable in your forecasting. Like sometimes product might tell you that if there's a bigger feature request, hey, you know what? Like we will get back to the customer in 2 months of time, and then you ink it on the contract, and right at 2 months it'll not be there, right? It'll magically disappear. So and that's an important thing that you need to keep a note of, right? And you need to check that variable as a part of your forecast. Otherwise, if you remove these variables out, eventually you're going to predict it wrong, right? And similarly, in your customer side as well, there are multiple teams who get involved, right? It's not just your let's say, for example, you're selling, let's take a neutral tool like a Salesforce, right? People think Salesforce is only for sales teams. Absolutely not, right? Even the CX team is actually going ahead and viewing Salesforce, right? And product team looks at it for insights, and then you have your even customer support teams look at Salesforce, right? So the problem is that if you're looking at only one side of the story, right, then you can forecast only for that side of the story, right? And that is where multi-threading will really help, right? At least like for complex deals, like or for enterprise deals, or for any deals that your company considers an enterprise. And the important part to consider there is what is the important success metric for this particular team, right? And am I achieving that? Is there a checkbox in my forecast, right? And that can pretty much lead to a stronger number, right? Presenting the number itself, you'll be much more confident and stronger because you've not created one champion, but multiple champions within your prospect organization as well, right? And that almost like not only like helps you like that kind of bias or remove that kind of that hey this is not going to close kind of thing, and builds a little more optimism within your team. That's what I think.
Yeah, got it. Totally. Because there's so much information from multiple different teams that could actually help with the actual forecasting process to make it even more accurate, right? So getting everybody involved and on the same page is, I can imagine, being very, very important in that process. Jordan, do you have any insights on that?
I think there's two things. Is one, making sure that you have the right data and knowledge, right, from those teams, like the sales operations team, the product teams, because in marketing, right, because everyone has those pieces in the data, different pieces that they own, and understanding from their perspective is really meaningful. And I think the other piece of it, one thing that's really embedded here at Conga, which I really appreciate, is it's truly, it's not a sales owned number, right? It's not a CXO number. It's an organization, right? And I know that if I'm on a complex opportunity, we can bring in someone from product. We can bring, hey, we need marketing's help on this. We need this customer. We need customer story. Hey, whatever we need. The team at Conga really knows it's like, hey, this is one number, right? We might not be customer facing every single day, but we can lean in, we can help out. And I think that really working for an organization, being a part of an organization that really has that mindset, it is really powerful because, hey, an SDR might not be the one that has the opportunity close, but they are important to be bringing the quality opportunities in, right? The partner network or the product team, giving that feedback and having that circle of conversation is only going to make the organization better. And it's easier to forecast when you be able to have all of those resources at your fingertips. So I think it's making sure, hey, is the organization bought in? Is everyone leaning in together? And I think it's taking that away from like, hey, is sales going to hit their forecast? What is the forecast of sales? But also showing that transparency of the forecast across the organization and knowing that this is not a sales forecast, it's everyone's.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Yeah, and I like what you said there, where even I can relate back when I was working for a company that was very product led, right? So the sales team wasn't. We were there, but we didn't really, we really needed the product team to kind of give us insights so we can actually move deals along and actually kind of portray to our clients what's going on, right? So, yeah, I totally understand how important it is to, especially for some organizations, to have all the different teams come together to help build those forecasts, right? Great. Well, we only have a few minutes left. I'm learning a ton, but I do want to get a couple more questions from you guys. One thing I want to know is if you have, what are, any other time-saving tips per se when forecasting, so we can focus less on forecasting, and especially, I'll push it over to Chris here first, less on forecasting and more time selling, and, because that's what we're here to do, right? Because I remember I read a stat of something like 12%. We did a survey about 212 leaders, and they said about 12% of their reps are doing around 20 hours a week of forecasting, which is a bit mind blowing, right? So, what tips do you have to minimize the amount of admin work that goes into your forecasting process, so you can focus on what you're really, really good at, and that's the selling process? What do you have there, Chris?
Absolutely. I mean, I think as a whole, I think it takes everybody in the team. I think it takes sales leaders, sales operations, even like the Salesforce admins to kind of help put things together. So as long as there's transparency among all those teams and that the sales reps have a process to forecasting that makes sense, that helps them, then they're actually going to use it, which end user adoption of any kind of process or sales tool is essentially going to be incredible and going to be if it works or not. Mm-hmm. So for me, I mean, if you flip the script and you say, that's a vast amount of sales reps to be wasting that much time just forecasting, right? Which is, essentially spending half of your time not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So like if you had, which should be unacceptable, right? Like if you had a doctor that was spending, half of his time, I don't know, organizing shelves or doing something like admin work, doing a bunch of paperwork, monotonous stuff, you'd say, okay, how can I cut this time down so you can see more patients? When in reality, it should be seen the exact same way for sellers, so that we can continue selling and bringing more revenue in for the business so we can grow. But for me, I think so much of it has to do also with sales tools. Mm-hmm. And actually having the right tools in place that can save me that time. Because if I have the guardrails to stay in and I have the sales tools that are going to help me save that time, then that's more effort that can be placed elsewhere.
Yeah, love that. Exactly, right. And having the right tools, you said it perfectly. Having the right tools in place then give you and enable you to spend less time on the admin stuff, right, and more on the stuff that you want to do, and that's sell, right? So, Pradeep, do you have any tips or time-saving tips for forecasting for our audience so they can focus on what they really want to be doing?
Sure. So one thing that I would say is like now everything is like moving towards a product-led buy, right? With companies giving trial left, right, center, right? Everybody would want to evaluate the trial and then purchase. So incorporating that as a part of your sales cycle can help you forecast better. This is a learning that I recently got, right? Because more often than not, we put people on a trial and then we keep checking in. Hey, checking in, what's happening, right? You already have that information. if you can just populate that within the CRM, right? Where, hey, you know what, this customer has this much of activity within the product, right? So that your follow-ups and all of those can be like much more meaningful than just a random check-in, right? And that will directly have an impact on your forecast as well, because now you can have the actionable insights into your trial activity, right? And more often than not, reps are generally like not equipped well enough, right, towards the trial activity and the trial insights, because like SaaS as a product has a lot of these insights available, right? They can just push those insights and make sure that your reps are well equipped to go ahead and assemble this information properly, and then derive good insights from the information as well, right? So that would be one good tip to forecast better.
Awesome. Love it. That's fantastic. And I will end it with you, Jordan. Do you have any final time-saving tips for our audience when forecasting?
Yeah, I would just say, expectations and enablement, right? It's as a leader, setting the right expectations. How do you forecast? What do I expect every single forecast? And making sure that make it very black and white, right? Because, you don't need to add paragraphs of X, Y, Z, but it's like, these are the 5 things that we need to know on each, stage as we continue to progress and advance the deal. What are those, and make it very clear so that reps understand, hey, what do I need to do to make this the next step? What questions do I need to ask? How do I do this? And it's really enabling and empowering the team. So that way, the forecasting call is really, again, strategic, strategizing on how to advance the opportunity forward. Where are we stuck? What are things that we haven't done, right? And then really focusing on, hey, I know every single time I need to update these few things. It's very easy. Maybe it's in a one layout. So it's, hey, all my opportunities are here. X, Y, and Z is complete for me. And then I can continue to progress forward, because I think the more that's black and white and enabled to them, I think it makes it easier on the reps. And then therefore, if the whole organization leans in that same way, right, whether it's a methodology like MEDDIC or something like that, then the leaders know what to do, and then everyone's kind of speaking the same language, and there's not ambiguity, which I think is one of the biggest challenges, like we kind of said at the very beginning, right, when it comes to forecasting. So the more that it can become black and white, eliminating the ambiguity, it makes it easier on the reps and the leaders in the organization when it comes to forecasting.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that too. So if everyone's on the same page, there's no confusion. We all know kind of where we're going, and then it all is gravy. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you all so much for your insights. I learned so much, and I'm sure our audience did too. Very valuable takeaways from on my end, and I'm excited to start putting those into play as well. So thank you, Chris, Pradeep, and Jordan, so much for taking the time out of your day to bless us with your knowledge and expertise, and giving back to our community. So really appreciate you having hopping on with us today. For everybody that's on the line, Conga, thank you so much for sponsoring us this webinar. They're fantastic. I love the team. They're great. Go check them out if you haven't already. They're doing amazing things. And if you have any further questions for either Chris, Pradeep, or Jordan, go connect with them on LinkedIn, send them a message. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer anything that we didn't get to today. So again, thank you to the audience for spending the time with us. We really appreciate you taking the time in your day, and even more so, Pradeep, Chris, and Jordan. Thank you all so much, and I'm really excited to do it again soon.